Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann, and today we are thrilled to welcome an award-winning legendary artist, creator of many of the matte paintings from films such as Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Tron, among many others. Please help us welcome Harrison Ellenshaw. Harrison, thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Well, to start with, I'm a huge fan, and you're the first guest that we've had where I actually have something from their family hanging on my wall. I have an Ellenshaw Mary Poppins painting like 10 feet behind me. So I have been a big fan of you and your dad for some time. So I was thrilled when you agreed to do the show. And we're going to get into your legendary career. And a lot of times people have come on and we ask them if they come from artistic families. And like we just said, you do. Your father, Peter, was a legendary Academy Award winner and produced the matte paintings for many great films, among them Mary Poppins, for which he won the Academy Award. So we want to start, like, how did he get into it to begin with?
Well, I was coming out of the Navy after 3 years in the Navy, and I didn't want to follow in my father's footsteps. I mean, fill his shoes. That would be crazy. And so I started looking around for a job. It was late 1970, and there was a recession going on, and not many jobs were, hard to believe, but I just kept kind of coming back. I wanted to work for the telephone company, do something really boring, and just kind of get away from the
legacy,
big Ellenshaw thing that I had all around me. And it's not, I loved my father, and he was, and he understood that. He said, "That's okay, go do what you have to do." And but by then he had retired. Alan Maley, the great Alan Maley, had taken over the department, the matte department at Disney. Mm-hmm. And so eventually I was just get so frustrated, and my father never pushed me or anything, but he did say, when I was we were going somewhere in the car, and he said, "Well, if you like, I think Alan's looking for matte artists, because he goes around to schools and to art schools, and nobody wants to paint like a photograph." Mm-hmm. It's like, why would I want to do that? Hey, and so my father suggested, "Why don't you give Alan a call, tell him that you'll be an apprentice in the matte department, and happy to do that for about 6 months, and then when the economy turns around, we get back to being something else." So I did so, and it just, I had been around movies all my life. Right. So I knew, what movies were about. But Alan showed me a whole new, kind of broadened my horizons. And one of the first things he did was, that was before VHS and all that stuff. So he he got a print of the summer of '42, and we ran it in one of the screening rooms at Disney. And he said, I want you to just watch this opening sequence, this main title sequence, and wait till it's over, and then we'll stop and we can talk about it. And it was a revelation, because I realized, even though I had seen my father work and all kinds of things, that here was an ability to visually, and of course the music helped too, but visually look at this little story. It was kind of the preface to the movie. And suddenly I started to see things from a broader perspective. And then I just kind of went on, and fortunately, I started watching a lot of movies.
Well,
Because they bring them into the screening room at Disney. And it was only department heads that were supposed to go in there. But I'd wait till the film started, then I'd sneak in and stand by the back door. And I saw so many great movies. I saw Network, and one day I actually went to a cinema, and I saw Rocky, and then I just, it's like I was addicted.
The thing about what you do, and you said it earlier, is that this is essentially photorealistic painting, which is a highly specialized, highly skilled, form of fine art, let alone matte painting. So how did you prepare yourself for this, or did you just have a built-in skill set that you were able to draw from, or how did you build that? Because I've actually dabbled in photorealism myself, not in terms of matte painting, but in a very different sort of way, and it's something that I have a strong connection to. So did you have a connection to it? It was a sensibility that you had, or did you really have to train yourself to be able to provide that kind of work in that environment?
I had to kind of refine my skills, and I'd start painting, and I'd take this small sable brush, and I'd be there going, this has got, every stroke has to be perfect. I've got to. And my father saw me doing that one day and said, stop tickling it. Because give me the brush. And I'd hand him the brush, and I'd say, he'd go, no, bigger brush. And we'd go up until literally he had a brush that was about this size, almost a house painting brush. And he just took this, dug into the acrylics, and just boom, 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 boom. And it was like a magic trick. And he said, that's when I learned that, make it interesting. Don't try to show off, and be sure that you're making the one or two story points to move it on. You don't want people going, wow, I don't know what the hell's going on, but that is a great tree. Look how look at those leaves. So, if you're looking at that, you've lost your audience.
Well, I did read something about you, and I want to know if this is true. You were the very first passenger on the Disney Railway?
Well, yes, I was. So there was, we would go down to the Disneyland on Sundays while it was under construction.
Okay.
And that was a big treat. That was really kind of cool. And there was very few workmen there because it was Sunday. And Walt would go down and wander around the park and look at how things were progressing. And Walt Disney sees me and says, how would you like to have the first ride on the Disney Santa Fe, whatever, railroad? And I'm thinking, oh yeah, great. You know, where's the locomotive? Okay. And he said, so there's a flat car. It's just a flat board on wheels on a little side area. And I happen to have my I had come from I guess Sunday school, and so I had my shiny shoes on, and I kind of dressed nicely, and Kelly says, "Okay, come on, jump on." And I thought, okay, well, what do I do? Now I'm facing forward. He's behind me. Everybody knew he was a heavy smoker, and he starts pushing this thing. And I'm thinking, he's gonna just push it and then let it go down the track, and we'll be all done, say goodbye. And now he's starting to breathe very heavily. And I'm thinking, oh, please don't let the LA Times say, 10-year-old kills Walt Disney in tragic railroad accident. Because this is not how I want to go down in history. But sure enough, instead of just pushing and letting it go, he jumps on the back and starts riding with me. And I realized later, or at that point, that he was the one that really wanted to get on there. So I was just a passenger. My father had the presence of mind to turn to my mother, who always had his camera, which my father didn't, anyway. And so, and snap the picture. That's pretty infamous. It was great. It's great.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Well, what was your experience with Disney like himself?
He was everything that people say. The thing about Walt Disney is he had a curiosity. He always, for example, when he would go down and everything was under construction, if there's somebody there doing some last minute repairs or whatever, he'd ask them, "What are you doing? And why?" And it wasn't like grilling them and trying to trip them up. But there's a wonderful picture in one of the books, and it shows Walt Disney talking to somebody who's on Main Street, doing something to the streetcar horse-drawn carriages, grails, and that says it all about him. He went to the source, he'd find the guy who you may think is doing the most mundane work, but he'd ask him about it. How often do you empty the trash? Why don't you do it more often? Does the trash get? And you could see, if I could see later on, because I had a summer job at Disneyland. One summer I worked on the Snow White ride. Oh no, we're supposed to call them attractions. And I wasn't an employee, I was a cast member. Okay, well, sounds like an employee to me. So I was working on Snow White one summer, and then the next summer I worked on the Skyway. Now that was interesting because I got to wear lederhosen. This is embarrassing. But the young ladies would say, "Oh, aren't you cute? Look at your knees." I'm going, "Please don't bring up my knees." Because I had shorts and then long socks on. But it was a wonderful place to work, and I know things have changed, unfortunately. But that was because Walt cared.
Well, from what I saw, one of the first things that you did for Disney professionally was Bed Knobs and Broomsticks with Angela Lansbury. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience, and what was it like for you now to be working somewhat on your own?
Well, the only thing I did on Bed Knobs and Broomsticks was the shot where Angela Lansbury is on her broom, and she's flying over where she's over the troops, all the troops that they're gathering. That's that are just the metal armor. Yeah. And behind Angela Lansbury on her broomstick is a flag, a Union Jack. Now this was shot and then it was all composited. But anyway, so we shot some of the elements, and so the flag was supposed to be flapping in the breeze. Alan said, "We can't have just a stiff flag, and that won't look right." So he painted a small flag and then scraped it off the glass and then put it on another element somewhere. And I had to lay on my back with a fan to make the flag move. So that was my first job.
So now you're working at Disney after your father was really considered a legend there. Was that somewhat daunting to you, or did you just move sort of?
Well,
right
it was daunting because after about 2 years after I got past my 6 months, only a little while later, Alan said, I'm retiring. I'm going to go live at my house in Sausalito and relax." And I said, "Well, who's going to take your place?" He said, "You are."
Oh, wow.
So he went to the big shots at the studio and told them of his plan. And they said, "So the idiot's son is going to take over, and he's just been here for, half an hour. How can we let that happen?" And Alan said, "Trust me. And if he doesn't work out, I'll come back." And that's when I saw the opening.
Wow.
I ran.
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to ask you about my movie, Escape to Witch Mountain, because Rob Klein, our mutual friend here, said that you actually did some work on that. Is that actually true, or was he?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can never remember Escape from Witch Mountain, Return to Witch Mountain.
Well, that was Escape was
Why
the
would
first
you
one.
escape and then you want to return?
Believe me, I even get the title mixed up myself. A lot of people say Escape from Witch Mountain, and it's Escape to Witch Mountain and Return from Witch Mountain. So there it is. We have the semantics to deal with.
Winnebago in there somewhere?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But do you what actually did you do on it? So this is our personal connection.
I think I did. I think I did. There's a main title sequence that has dogs running in it.
Yes.
So I shot that, and then there's a mountain and a lot of stuff that I don't really remember because it's so long ago.
Mhm.
But there was also, I think there was a car that comes and spins, and then so we had to add the tire tracks
Mm.
to rotoscope them into. So, it was a lot. Again, like everything else, it's always a challenge, and you just you don't know what's going to happen, and you
Yeah.
just have to be clever. And I learned that from my father. I learned that from Alan Maley. You have to be inventive. You have to, it's times come. Time is money.
Well, that opening sequence is quite scary and haunting. I remember when I first saw it myself, and I thought, "Wow, this is a great way to set this movie up." So that was successful. I think you were very successful with that.
Well, you have the tough job.
Oh my gosh.
I don't.
I was just I was just
just,
playing. I was being a kid and playing and having a great time.
I don't care. You can't minimize it. It is because you have to look at yourself on that big screen and think, did that bother you at all, or just you were having fun, or
No, I actually was a very odd and strange child. I ate up the pressure. I loved being having the job. I loved having the job. I loved doing the work. And I took to it like a duck to water. I'm telling you, because I started at 9 years old. I ended up getting Escape to Witch Mountain at 11 years old, and it was a big dream of mine. I mean, I had as a very young child actor, aware of how the business worked. I wanted to work for Disney. I wanted to be in something Disney, and that ended up being the first job that I got there,
what was the first
after
movie?
Escape to Witch Mountain. Yeah.
Oh,
And it after auditioning many times and worrying that I was never going to get to work for the studio, I ended up getting a co-starring part in, which is now amongst so many others, a classic Disney movie. And so it was an overwhelming experience for me, but I had fun because I enjoyed it. I loved what I did. I loved being a part of the process, and there were so many special effects in the movies that I relished doing and had so much fun. And getting to see some animation at the beginning, and the rotoscoping of Kim and I running, and all the stuff that came together for that opening sequence was really fascinating to me, from
yeah.
the other side of it. So thank you for your work. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. No,
So, how did you get involved with Industrial Light and Magic? I mean, it was still relatively in its infancy when you got there for Star Wars. What do you remember about that? And how did you get involved? And what was it like working on Star Wars?
well, it was the yin and yang because I was working on Peace Dragon at the same time, and I had gotten a call uh, from Jim Nelson, uh, who somehow was trying to find a matte artist.
Mhm.
And he said, would you be interested? And I said, well, this, that, and other thing. He said, well, when we get back from shooting in London, will you still be available? And I thought, yeah, but I usually go onto the set and shoot the plates. That way I have some degree of control over it. If you let somebody else shoot the plates, doesn't know matte painting, or bust up from an f-stop, you're in trouble. They won't give you the right stuff. But so we kind of made this agreement, and eventually they got back from London. I was working on Pete's Dragon, and they said, "We're okay, we're ready for you." And so it was post-production. So I'd work on Pete's Dragon post-production during the day. I would go home for dinner. I'd go to Industrial Light and Magic, which was then in Van Nuys, and I'd work until cutoff time, which is when the film has to go into the lab. And I did that for I don't know how many months, long time.
Wow.
Seemed like a long time, but I loved it, and the contrast was so interesting. And you know, eventually going to the cast and crew screening, sorry, at the Academy Theater, and George was very secretive. Nobody could see the cuts, which was frustrating to me because I wanted to know how my shots would integrate. And in fact, the first time they built only half of the Millennium Falcon on the stage in England. So I thought it was symmetrical. So when I painted in the other half, I painted in the cockpit as well. I thought, well, that's where the co-pilot sits or something. And I showed the first temp in dailies at ILM, and everybody's laughing their butts off at my shot. And I'm thinking, what is this? This is so rude and inconsiderate. And so George said to me, well, have you looked at the miniatures? I said, no, I come in here at night and they're all locked up because people are walking off with the miniatures. Oh. So he said, well, okay, you've got to say, we'll get somebody to unlock the cabinet and you could look at the miniatures or do whatever you want. And I then realized that I made a mistake.
Oh, no. Oh, that's crazy.
It is crazy. But it was so exciting because George Lucas said to me at one point, I said, well, how do you think this is going to do? I was a little worried because when I saw the storyboards and there's this giant monkey, this was the same time King Kong came out. I thought, this show is doomed. I mean, and he doesn't even talk. He just goes, and then there's Han Solo, who looks like he's out of a Western. He's got, is he got a duel? He's got this laser thing, but it looks like a gun. And it just made no sense to me. So I didn't have high hopes, but boy, that seeing it was 3 days before the big opening, but seeing at the cast and crew, you hear this, and of course John Williams, and you're thinking, whoa, that's nice. And see the ball going out there, and then what happens? There's this giant star cruiser that comes over camera from the top, and it just keeps and going, and you think, where's the end of this sucker? This is crazy. And that I just gave in to it, and I said, this is going to be a great ride, and it was.
Well, what was George Lucas like to work with?
He's great. He's very shy, as people will tell you. He was never mean, but you would get stuck in a corner. I would get stuck in a corner, and I'd say, well, George, I don't know if I can give you the shot that you want, but here's a couple of options. And every time I did that, George would just look at me and go, just give it another try. And he just had that vision. And so eventually I learned what that vision was. And by the time Empire Strikes Back came along, I had kind of, that was tough because I was working on the Black Hole. Let's not go there.
We did want to ask about it.
Well, it was anyway, working on the Black Hole, and it was, we were getting dead to the point, which was great because I worked with my father for the first time in a collaborative way. And we were getting to the end, which for those of you out there contemplating about making a movie, make sure that the script has an ending already before you start shooting. Don't do this, oh, we'll worry about that later kind of thing. Well, what happens? Do they go through the black hole? I don't know. Well, it's called the Black Hole. Well, it was originally called Space Probe 1. So either one is not exactly, for family audiences. And so I came up with an ending that they tried, didn't use. And so by then, it was getting pretty critical. And I said, okay, I got to go. I'm going up to ILM and get involved in this other movie that actually has an ending. What a concept. And it left my father holding the bag. And eventually he came up with the fire and brimstone thing.
Well, on Black Hole, you were nominated though. Wasn't that gratifying though?
Yeah, it was. But nominations, it's always nice to be nominated.
Did you go to the award ceremony?
Yes, I did. In fact, I was working up in San Rafael, so I flew down to the award ceremony, and it was lovely because I flew down with my then wife, and we had a seat afterwards at the governor's ball. And my father and my mother were there, and I was there. And then people would come up to to our table and say hello to my father. And Jim Henson came up, and Miss Piggy was, gosh, can't recall his name. He's right there, tip of my tongue. And I thought this was really sweet to see that my father had a good reputation of doing good work, and that people who also did good work could acknowledge that.
Well, I think that's incredibly important. So, I mean, after the Black Hole, you did another Disney movie, The Watcher in the Woods, with Betty Davis, and of course, I had the opportunity to work with Betty myself. But it really wasn't like most Disney movies. What are some of your memories of Betty and working on that?
Well, again, don't make a movie where you haven't really resolved what the end is. So,
No.
Okay.
This is becoming a theme here.
So she comes back, but then where did she go, and why is she back? So I was in between projects, the film had finished. Another thing, never, ever, ever do this, but it had its premiere in New York. And people couldn't understand what the hell was going on. So they pulled the movie out of Radio City Music Hall after 2 weeks and said, okay, we're going to fix this. And they called Harrison because they went around to everybody on the Disney lot. I was up north, and they called Harrison. Everybody had submitted an idea, but there was, it was the guard at the gate, the janitor, everybody had, this should happen, this should happen. And it became such a muddle that they thought, what do we do? Oh, yeah, Harrison. I was on vacation in New Orleans. I think it was in New Orleans. And somehow they got my number. Tom Leach got my number, who I knew from Disney. And he said, we've got a problem, Houston. And I said, okay, well, what do you want me to do? He said, well, when are you coming back? I said, well, give me a chance to, go down to see the Mississippi or something, and I'll be back as soon as I can. So I go back, and there's a certain nervous tension everywhere. Because now they've really complicated measures, but because it was Betty Davis's 100th movie.
Oh, wow.
Like, oh, honey, come on, we're gonna go see Betty Davis. It's her 100th movie, which is amazing. Give her credit, and what a trooper. And so they were anxious to come up with a better ending. So I looked at the ending, which at one point, one of the ones they were considering was where the Watcher actually comes up around a corner. It looks like a lobster, looks like a giant lobster. I'm not kidding. And it was just, I just kind of doubled over. They said, "See what we made?" Thing. And I said, well, let me think about it. And I went, I thought about it, and I thought, the thing that's missing here is you need a narrator, but you don't want to just put a narration over it suddenly at the last minute, and now the Watcher, disguised as a giant lobster, comes around the corner. I said, so you got to change the look of the thing, and you can't have voiceover. So the little girl that goes into the trance, she kind of rolls her eyes, and she becomes the narrator of when the Watcher shows up. And the Watcher then, instead of a lobster, we took like a skull, and then turned the camera upside down, and so the pouring liquid on it, some sort of like white paint, it would appear that this is going up, the liquid is going up out of frame, and it could be explained by the little girl who goes into a trance and starts to say this, that, and other, and until the solar eclipse, and blah, 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 blah. And so it was put out in theaters after that, and again it bombed. So
Hmm.
it was, my chance of saving another film was in tatters.
Well, let's talk about one that did do well. You went back for Empire, which many people consider to be the best of all the Star Wars films. So
I
can you tell
agree.
us a little bit about that production? And was there any pressure on everyone because of the success of Star Wars?
Correct. There's pressure, because everybody's gone, well, the first one was great. How can they follow up that? And maybe the first one was just a fluke. And so the pressure was very high, but because it was such a great script, and because by then it was the dream team.
Mhm.
And it was a little bit difficult that John Dykstra wasn't asked back, which really stung for John. Not to this day, we don't quite know why, but George doesn't. George looks forward, never looks back, and but had this incredible team of artists and technicians, and there was no option but to succeed. Failure is not an option, and I think it turned out pretty darn well.
I'll say yes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
I went from about 10 to 12 shots on Star Wars to 85 on Empire, and it was still a very tiny crew. These days, you'd hire thousands, right, to do whatever. But I was blessed by having Ralph McQuarrie, who was wonderful conceptual artist in that, and George was very loyal to Ralph, and Ralph was getting ready to kind of pack up and go home, and because he didn't think he had a job, and George said, well, you can work in the mat department. I'm sure that'll work out. And so here I am, this squeaky voiced barely 30-year-old telling the great Ralph McQuarrie what to do. I'm his boss, and this is like, so I just felt sorry for him. So we came to an agreement, and I said, look, Ralph, I know you hate the technical aspects. You don't want to have to be concerned about f-stops and exposures and all sorts of stuff. You paint and let me take care of the rest of it. And he did. And he loved that arrangement. And he was magnificent. And he contributed greatly to the film. And all the good shots are Ralph's. because he loved being able to do things that told the story, that had scope to it, that had dynamic stuff. And I was happy to just do the grunt work of doing matte shots of things that hopefully you don't know is a matte shot or effect shot. It worked out really well. Yeah. And also we had another artist, Michael Pangrazio, who was doing the miniature backings. Now backings were pretty large, but he could paint. He was a savant. I mean, originally there were going to be transparencies, and then composite or whatever, but decided against that. And so when the walkers come, the background was Pangrazio's, I think. So he worked on a number of shots. I worked on a number of shots. Ralph did all the good shots, and thankfully, and it worked out. It was a great time. We were really flying high.
My gosh. So then after that, you go back to Disney for another classic film, Tron. And at the time, Tron was like considered to be this whole groundbreaking movie with the technology. What are some of the effects that you created for that film?
Tron. It was nothing like it had ever been done before. It was so far ahead of its time. I took the job only because I was working on Watcher in the Woods, few changes or whatever it was. And Steven Lisberger came into my office, which was in the animation building, with Tom Wilhite, who was the head of production at Disney. And he walked in and he said, I think you two should meet. And I had a reputation of working on Empire and Star Wars. And Steven had this just crazy idea. And of course, you know, I'm just going, sure, you know, never turn down a job. Fake it to make it. And I had no idea how we were going to do it. And at one point, it was going to be these costumes that would be shot against white. And Bruce Logan, who was a cinematographer, said, look, there's 45 minutes of the film, 50 minutes of the film. I can't, if I tried lighting white, we won't be done until next millennium. And I said, okay, well, we can't shoot against black. Well, yes, we could. So we shot against black. We reinvented the wheel. It was you'd go down this way and drift off here, and then, nope, that's not going to work. Back up. Okay, now let's try it this way. And you just had to find these little victories every day. We only need this many people. Well, doing the math, we took one week to basically kind of stop, and we shot all the live action, right? And reanalyze and do, as I say, do the math and go, okay, if we've got this much rotoscoping to do, and we've got this many people in the union here in LA, which is about 10, 15 that can do this stuff. Let's see. Okay, we're going to have to do 64,000 frames. Okay, that'll be interesting. Came up with such ideas. I tell you what, we'll go to UCLA, USC, we'll get film students, we'll bring them all in here, and we'll have a class. The first class will, they'll be here for a week or two, and we'll say, okay, this is a codelith. Everyone see that? Codelith. This is a Hicon, which is produced by putting the codelith together with some other film. And I was as confused then as I am now. So we thought, okay, but we realized that if we did it, it would take that much time to do that little amount of footage that we'd have to change, kind of switch horses. So we went from white backgrounds to black backgrounds, and then we, oh God. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy.
Well,
And
yeah.
we had to hire tons more people.
Well, the finished product is worth it. I mean, it really was just an incredible movie for especially for the time. It like Ike said, it was groundbreaking for a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was, and it was too far ahead of its time in a way, because it got snubbed for a visual effects nomination.
Right, yeah.
It's like, and that broke my heart. Not for me necessarily, but for the whole crew, for dozens and dozens of people who were slaved over all sorts of stuff.
Well, you want to ask about, there's another, you worked with legendary people after legendary person. You worked with Francis Ford Coppola on Captain EO, the film created for the Disney park starring Michael Jackson. What are some of your memories of that experience and working with him? And did you interact with Michael at all?
Oh, Michael's super. He was great. Now I kind of fell into working on Captain Ego, as we called it, because I was at Disney. I was vice president of visual effects or some trumped up name. And I was going to delegate to other visual effects supervisors, but then this came along and they said, okay, put on your big boy pants and get going with this. And the original budget, it was going to be like a music video. So
right.
A short piece, and it was going to cost $2 million, $4 million or whatever, because you're going to pay $1 million to Francis, $1 million to George, and probably more than $1 million to Michael. And so the budget was just ludicrous because it was so low. But that was part of, it was one of the first projects out of the box by Michael Eisner, and they wanted to make an impression. Well, Francis also wanted to make impression. So I'd laid out a schedule where you kind of start on the easy stuff first, and then you build as the crew gets used to each other and everything goes. No, Francis operates the other way. He said, it's basically go for the juggler. We're going to do this big, because the suits are going to come by and look. And if we're shooting some little scene over in the corner, they're going to say, it's not impressive. So we get the rig going, and rather than just shake the camera, there was this whole hydraulic system, so the whole set would rock and roll, and so there are fire hoses and everything all around, hydraulics, and it was impressive. The only problem was, at one point, it broke, and suddenly there's water, coming up, and it's about, I don't know, 6-8 inches of water on the stage. And now, so the suits are kind of looking, it's like, what the hell? And then somebody's going, well, wait a minute. There are these lights there's electricity. We're all going to die electrocuted. Again, I see the headlines in Variety. Entire crew and superstar dead.
Wow.
What none of us realize that lights are direct current, and it's alternating current that kills you. So, but it was so funny. So it was supposed to take only 2 weeks to shoot, right? Because there was only limited amount of money, and eventually we said we need an additional unit, not a second unit, but an additional unit, so that the additional unit will shoot from dinner time to cutoff time, midnight, whatever. And so that worked out okay. Michael, you had to let Michael go after his 8 hours or whatever. But Michael was so great, because he'd say, it was shot in 3D as well. And so he'd say, after his time was up, he said, I don't mind going late for whatever, I'm happy to help. And he was very generous with his time. He didn't get paid overtime. He was getting so much money anyway. And that was his attitude. It's like, how can I help here? He was not a diva by any means. And great guy.
Well, one more major project we wanted to talk to you about is Dick Tracy with Warren Beatty and Madonna, and it's such a visually stunning movie. Can you tell us just a little bit about that production and what your responsibilities were there?
Well, Warren Beatty, what a piece of work. He was determined to beat me down.
Oh, wow.
He's an interesting person, but let's face it, he's an actor. So he takes on this role of being, same word that starts actor, and ass. He thinks that's the way to motivate people. I mean, this is total psychotic stuff. So he would never final a shot. We'd look at, we're not going to end this interview on this horrible subject.
No, we're not.
We're not.
Yeah.
I just can't tell you how vain he was. And some people say you're so vain. It's about him. Yes, he was that vain. We would take the dailies over the shots, and he would, for example, one day he came in. So now we've taken time out. We had to go over to his screening because he couldn't come to us, Mohammed, Mountain, et cetera. And so he'd go over there. And every time he'd come in, he'd have to do a performance. One time he came in with brand new Air Jordans. And I'm like, let's run this stuff so we can get back to the studio and try to finish a day's work. And he's going, look, these shoes pump up. I don't Warren, what your shoes do. So it always had to be an indulgence. this person that had no concept of, well, he did. He was just manipulating the studio to get more money. And it was painful. Eventually, well, add to that, and he's probably not watching this, but the Vittorio Storaro, who had been the cinematographer on Captain EO and was now the cinematographer on Dick Tracy. Vittorio would use every light on the truck, you know, and you'd be, oh, Harrison. So Vittorio wrote this whole thick essay about the meaning of color. Magenta shows the side of the left hand tennis ball as it runs. I'm not kidding. I found it the other day. It's so long, it's so ridiculous. And Vittorio had worked on previously on Lady Hawk. And then I did get an Academy Award or whatever. So he wrote this scathing letter to the director. I think was it Donner? I can't remember. That said, you know, you have hurt me so badly, but now I hug you and hope. I mean, it's just like so childish. So dealing with Warren and Vittorio, I was ready to slit my wrists. I was just like, no. Vittorio also had this wonderful thing. We're going to do a very colorful picture, but then we're going to run back through the developer again and add ENR, which mutes the colors. What? But that's Vittorio had this special, you know, magic elixir that he would charge extra for to make the film look bad. I don't know. It's crazy. It was crazy.
Who knew that there were inflated egos in show business?
Yeah. Warren would just drag his feet, and every week it'd be another. I'm not sure. So you say, Warren, do you like this shot? And his return was shoe leather. Okay, well, we'll put that down in the notes. Shoe leather, and he thought he could create by saying what he didn't want in the shot. You know, I don't want the background to look too overexposed. I don't want the matte paintings to look like a refrigerator with the door ajar. It's like, Warren, we can play this game forever, but maybe you could tell us what you want it to look like instead of going the other way around. But I realized at a certain point, he really didn't know what he wanted.
Well, let's end it on what are you up to now? What are you doing now that people can follow you with and check out your work?
I'm telling stories out of school.
Well, that's the best story.
It's not all bad, as I said earlier. You know, the last films, they were TV shows that I worked on was Hercules and Xena, Warrior Princess. Now, you know, a lot of my compatriots said, wait a minute, you've worked on this, and this, and movies, and now you're going to go and do episodic TV? I said, yes. You know why? because the people are nice. And if it's not working, you got to air it the next day on television. And then you get a whole new week to do another 80 shots. And if you're battling with people, you can't extend the air date. It doesn't work that way. And I really enjoyed it. It was great fun.
Did I read that you're selling art now? You're selling your art now as well?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are you selling your art now? Did I read that? I want to know if that was true. No. Okay.
My days of painting are done. I had to try to leave at the top. And then people say, well, why'd you work on Xena? I go, okay, you missed the point.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It was such a pleasure getting to talk to you. Like I said, we're both big fans. And truthfully, like I said, I have an Ellenshaw hanging on my wall behind me. So thank you so much for doing this. And like I said, anytime you'd like to come back, we'd love to have you.
I'd love to. It's great. You guys have been wonderful, and thank you.
Well, again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann. And again, a very special thanks to Harrison Ellenshaw. And please subscribe.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.